How do you stop 70 tons of German steel when you have no anti-tank weapons? In February 1945, Polish soldier Tomasz Kowalski stood in the ruins of a Warsaw suburb with a problem. A Tiger tank was rolling toward his position, and his unit had nothing that could penetrate its armor. No Panzerfausts, no anti-tank guns, no air support, just rifles that bounced off tank armor like pebbles. So Tomasz did what Polish resistance fighters had done for 6 years of occupation. He improvised. Using scrap metal from destroyed German vehicles, stolen explosives from an ammunition depot, and welding equipment salvaged from a bombed factory, Tomasz spent 3 days building something that looked like a child's science project, a rocket launcher made from a drainage pipe, bed springs, and wire. His commanding officer called it suicide. His fellow soldiers called it junk. The Tiger tank commander didn't even see it as a threat, just another desperate Pole with homemade weapons. Then Tomasz fired. The improvised rocket screamed across 200 meters and punched straight through the Tiger's side armor. The tank exploded, and suddenly everyone wanted to know how scrap metal had just killed Germany's most feared weapon. If you want to know how desperation creates innovation, subscribe now. This is the story of the rocket launcher built from garbage that stopped a Tiger tank cold. Tomasz Kowalski was born in 1918 in Warsaw, the son of a factory mechanic who worked at the Ursus tractor plant. By age 15, Tomasz could repair anything with an engine. By 20, he was one of Warsaw's best automotive mechanics, fixing cars, trucks, and industrial equipment. When Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, Tomasz joined the defense of Warsaw. The city held for 3 weeks before surrendering. For 5 years, Tomasz survived under Nazi occupation, working in German-controlled factories while secretly repairing weapons for the Polish resistance, the Armia Krajowa. In August 1944, the Warsaw Uprising began. Polish resistance fighters tried to liberate the city before Soviet forces arrived. Tomasz's mechanical skills became critical. He built improvised weapons called Filipinki, homemade grenades using drain pipes filled with explosives. He repaired captured German weapons. He even built a flamethrower from a fire truck pump and gasoline tanks. The uprising lasted 63 days. It failed. The Germans systematically destroyed Warsaw, building by building, street by street. For 200,000 Poles died. Tomasz survived by hiding in sewers, moving through underground tunnels, staying one step ahead of SS execution squads. By October 1944, Warsaw was rubble. The Germans deported survivors to concentration camps or labor battalions. Tomasz escaped through the Vistula River, joined Polish forces fighting alongside the Soviet Red Army. In January 1945, Soviet and Polish forces began the Vistula-Oder offensive, pushing the Germans out of Poland. Tomasz was assigned to the 1st Polish Army, 1st Infantry Division, poorly equipped, undersupplied, but determined to liberate their homeland. The problem was simple. They had rifles, some machine guns, a few mortars, but almost no anti-tank weapons, and Germany was throwing everything it had left into defensive positions across Poland, including Tiger tanks. Tigers were nightmares. 70 tons. He'd make him a gun that could destroy a T-34 at 2,000 meters. Frontal armor so thick that most anti-tank weapons were useless. A single Tiger could hold up an entire infantry battalion. Tomasz's unit had 2 Panzerfausts left. That was it, against at least 3 Tigers reported in their sector. "We need anti-tank weapons," his commander, Major Nowak, said during a briefing. Moscow promised resupply. Nothing's arrived. Tomasz looked at the map showing German defensive positions. Thought about 6 years of occupation. 6 years of making weapons from whatever he could find. "Sir," Tomasz said, "give me 3 days and access to salvage. I'll build something." Tomasz scavenged through the ruins of a destroyed German supply depot. He needed 3 things: a launch tube, propellant, and a warhead. For the tube, he found a 75mm diameter steel drainage pipe, 2 meters long, thick-walled, designed for industrial sewage systems. Perfect diameter for a shaped charge warhead. For propellant, he located a cache of abandoned German rocket-propelled grenades, Panzerschrecks that had been damaged and discarded. He carefully extracted the solid rocket fuel from 6 grenades, combined them, and repackaged the propellant into a single charge. For the warhead, Tomasz did something brilliant. He took a captured German Panzerfaust warhead, an 80mm shape charge designed to penetrate armor, and adapted it to fit his drainage pipe using welded steel collars. The principle was simple. Fire the rocket motor, propel the warhead forward through the tube at high velocity, detonate on impact. The shaped charge would focus explosive force into a superheated jet of metal capable of penetrating armor. The engineering was brutal improvisation. Tomasz used bed springs as shock absorbers, welded iron rods as a trigger mechanism, created firing electrodes from telephone wire and a truck battery, built a shoulder rest from a destroyed rifle stock, and padded it with canvas. His fellow soldiers watched him work in a bombed-out factory basement, surrounded by scrap metal and stolen explosives. "Tomasz, that thing looks like it'll explode in your hands," a soldier named Piotr said. "Maybe," Tomasz replied, adjusting the trigger mechanism. "But if it works, we can kill a tiger. And if it doesn't work, then I die quickly instead of slowly when the tiger overruns our position." Major Nowak inspected the finished weapon. It looked absurd. A drainage pipe mounted on a wooden frame with wire, springs, and welded metal everywhere, like something a desperate man had built in a basement. Which technically it was. "Kowalski, this is insane. Have you tested it?" "No, sir. We only have enough propellant for one shot." "One shot? What if you miss? Then we use the remaining Panzerfausts and hope." Nowak stared at the improvised launcher. "What's the effective range?" "Theoretically, 200 meters. Maybe 250 if the wind's favorable. Theoretically. You built a weapon you've never tested and don't know if it actually works." Tomasz looked at his commander. "Sir, in 6 years of occupation, I built 50 weapons that shouldn't work. They all worked. This will too." 2 days later, German armor rolled toward their position, including one Tiger tank, February 12, 1945 dawn. Tomasz's unit held defensive positions in the ruins of a village 30 kilometers east of Poznan. Intelligence reported German forces retreating westward, but fighting desperately at every position. Then the ground started shaking. Every soldier who'd fought tanks knew that feeling, the deep rumble that vibrated through frozen earth. "Heavy armor approaching. Tanks!" the forward observer shouted. 3. No, 4 German tanks incoming. 1 Tiger, 3 Panzer I-4s. Major Nowak grabbed binoculars. The Tiger was leading. Massive, angular, terrifying. Its 80mm gun could destroy their defensive positions from 2,000 meters. The accompanying Panzer IVs would handle infantry while the Tiger broke through. "We have 2 Panzerfausts," Nowak said. "Effective range 80 meters. We'll never get close enough to the Tiger. The Panzer IVs will slaughter us first." Tomasz carried his improvised rocket launcher to a forward position, a half-collapsed building with clear sight lines to the approach road. The weapon weighed 20 kilograms, awkward, unbalanced, terrifying to hold because one mechanical failure meant it would explode in his face. Piotr positioned himself beside Tomasz as spotter. "You really think that thing will work?" "I think it has to work. Because if it doesn't, that Tiger drives straight through our position and we all die." The German armor advanced methodically. The Tiger moved at 15 kilometers per hour, slow, cautious, scanning for anti-tank threats. Its commander knew Polish forces had few heavy weapons, but he also knew desperate men did unpredictable things. At 600 meters, the Tiger's turret swiveled, searching for targets. At 400 meters, Tomasz could see details: the commander's cupola, the thick frontal armor, the long 88-meter barrel. At 300 meters, Major Nowak radioed, "Kowalski, if you're going to fire that thing, do it now before they get any closer." Tomasz steadied the launcher on a pile of rubble. The Tiger's side armor was exposed, thinner than frontal armor, vulnerable if you could hit it. But the target was moving and Tomasz had never fired this weapon before. "Range 250 meters, Piotr said. "Moving left to right, maybe 10 kilometers per hour." Tomasz aimed, calculating lead time, elevation, trying to remember physics from a school he'd attended 20 years ago. 1 shot. If he missed, the Tiger would spot the muzzle flash, rotate its turret and obliterate their position with 188-meter round. "Fire when ready," Nowak's voice crackled over the radio. Tomasz took a breath and pulled the trigger. The improvised launcher kicked violently against Tomasz's shoulder. The rocket motor ignited with a deafening roar, louder than he'd expected, throwing a massive backblast that shattered what remained of the wall behind him. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the rocket screamed forward, trailing smoke, wobbling slightly because the drainage pipe wasn't perfectly straight. 250 meters. Time to target, less than 2 seconds. The Tiger commander saw the smoke trail. His turret started rotating toward Tomasz's position. Too slow, too late. The improvised rocket struck the Tiger's side armor just behind the front drive wheel. The shaped charge warhead detonated on impact, focusing explosive force into a superheated jet of metal, traveling at 8,000 meters per second. German side armor was 82 mm thick, strong, but not invincible. The shaped charge punched through like a blowtorch through paper, creating a thumbnail-sized hole that injected molten metal fragments into the crew compartment at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. The effect was catastrophic. The penetration hit the ammunition storage. 30 80mm shells detonated simultaneously. The Tiger's turret blew off, literally separated from the hull, flipping through the air, landing 20 meters away. Fire erupted from every hatch. Smoke poured from the engine compartment. The fuel tanks exploded seconds later, turning the 70-ton tank into a funeral pyre. Complete silence from the Polish positions. Everyone stared at the burning Tiger, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. Then Piotr started laughing, hysterical, disbelieving laughter. It worked. Your garbage pile rocket actually worked. The 3 accompanying Panzer IVs immediately reversed, retreating. Their commanders had just watched a Tiger, the most heavily armored tank in the German arsenal, get destroyed by a weapon they didn't recognize. If the Poles had something that could kill a Tiger, the Panzer IVs didn't want to find out what it would do to them. Major Nowak reached Tomasz's position, staring at the burning wreckage. Kowalski, what the hell did you just do? Tomasz's ears were ringing from the rocket blast. His shoulder throbbed from recoil. The improvised launcher was scorched and bent, one-shot weapon now destroyed. But 250 meters away, a Tiger tank burned. Proof that desperation, skill, and scrap metal could defeat 70 tons of German engineering. I built a rocket launcher, sir. And it worked. Word of Tomasz's improvised rocket launcher spread through the 1st Polish Army within hours. A mechanic had destroyed a Tiger tank with scrap metal and stolen explosives. Suddenly, every unit wanted their own Kowalski launcher. Soviet liaison officers arrived the next day to inspect the weapon's remains. They measured the destroyed drainage pipe, examined the welding, studied Tomasz's trigger mechanism. This is crude, a Soviet engineer said. New precision manufacturing. No standardized parts. How did you calculate the propellant charge? I didn't calculate, Tomasz replied. I estimated based on Panzerschreck motors and hoped it was enough. You hoped? You built a rocket launcher on hope? No, sir. I built it on 6 years of making weapons from whatever I could find. Hope was just the final ingredient. The Soviet engineer shook his head. This shouldn't work. The tube isn't rifled. The warhead attachment is unstable. The propellant could have detonated prematurely and killed you. But it didn't. It killed a Tiger instead. Major Nowak saw opportunity. Kowalski, can you build more of these? Tomasz surveyed available materials. The German retreat left behind destroyed vehicles, abandoned equipment, ammunition dumps. Yes, sir. If we have welding equipment, metal pipes, and captured warheads, I can teach others to build them. Over the next 3 weeks, Tomasz trained 15 soldiers in improvised weapon construction. They built 9 more launchers using drainage pipes, industrial tubing, even an old artillery barrel cut down to size. Each launcher was unique. Different lengths, different mounting systems, different trigger mechanisms. None were perfect. 3 exploded during testing, injuring 2 soldiers. But 6 worked reliably enough to be issued to anti-tank teams. The improvised launchers weren't elegant. They weren't safe. They weren't standardized military equipment, but they worked. And in February 1945, as Polish forces pushed toward Berlin, that was all that mattered. German. Intelligence reports from the period mention Polish, improvised anti-tank rockets of unknown origin. Wehrmacht commanders warned their tank crews that Polish positions might have Unexpected weapons, crude but deadly. The psychological effect was significant. German armor became more cautious. Tigers that had previously advanced boldly now approached Polish positions carefully, wary of hidden threats. Tomasz became a minor legend, the mechanic who'd built a tiger killer from garbage. But he refused special recognition. "I didn't invent anything new," he told reporters after the war. "I just used what I had. That's what we've done for 6 years. The Germans took everything from us, so we learned to fight with nothing." But nothing in Tomasz's hands had become something deadly. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. By then, Tomasz's improvised rocket launchers had destroyed 4 confirmed Tiger tanks, 7 Panzer IVs, and countless fortified positions. None of the launchers survived. They were one-shot or few-shot weapons that bent, warped, or exploded after use. But they'd accomplished their purpose, giving Polish soldiers a fighting chance against armor when they had nothing else. Tomasz survived the war with minor wounds, shrapnel scars, hearing damage from rocket backblasts, burns from welding accidents. He returned to Warsaw in June 1945, expecting to find his city rebuilding. Instead, he found ruins. 85% of Warsaw had been systematically destroyed by the Germans. The city Tomasz had grown up in, the streets he'd walked, the factories where he'd worked, the neighborhoods where his family had lived, was gone. His parents had died in the Warsaw Uprising. His 2 brothers had been killed fighting with Polish resistance. Tomasz was the only survivor of his family. Post-war Poland fell under Soviet control. The Polish resistance fighters who'd fought the Germans, men like Tomasz who'd built weapons in basements and sewers, found themselves marginalized by the new communist government. Their heroism was inconvenient. Their independence was threatening. Tomasz returned to what he knew, mechanics. He got a job at the rebuilt Ursus tractor factory, repairing agricultural equipment. The same hands that had built rocket launchers from scrap metal now fixed tractors and combines. He never spoke about the war. When coworkers asked if the rumors were true, that he'd destroyed a Tiger tank with a homemade weapon, Tomasz shrugged. "I survived. That's all that matters." In 1956, during a brief political thaw, the Polish government awarded Tomasz the Cross of Valor for his wartime service. He accepted it quietly, put it in a drawer, never wore it. "Why don't you display your medal?" his wife asked. "Because men who deserve medals are dead. I'm just the one who survived." The story of Tomasz's improvised rocket launcher might have died with him, except for one thing. In 1968, a Polish military historian researching improvised weapons contacted him for an interview. The historian, Dr. Jerzy Nowicki, had found German after-action reports mentioning Polish improvised anti-tank rockets and wanted to document how they'd been built. Tomasz, now 50 years old, finally agreed to tell his story. Over 3 days he explained the engineering, the materials, the desperate innovation that had driven Polish resistance for 6 years. "Why did you build it?" Dr. Nowicki asked. "You could have hidden, waited for the war to end safely." Tomasz's answer was simple: because we'd already waited 5 years for someone to save us. The world watched while Poland burned. We learned that if we wanted to survive, we had to save ourselves, with whatever we could build, steal, or improvise. But your weapon was dangerous. You could have killed yourself. Living under occupation was dangerous. Watching your country destroyed was dangerous. At least with the rocket launcher, I had a chance to fight back. Dr. Nowicki's research revealed something remarkable. Across occupied Poland, resistance fighters had built hundreds of improvised weapons. Grenades, flamethrowers, mortars, even armored vehicles constructed from city buses and concrete. The scale of ingenuity was staggering. The Polish resistance didn't have factories, supply lines, or industrial capacity. Dr. Nowicki wrote in his 1971 book, Improvised Weapons of the Polish Resistance. But they had mechanics, engineers and craftsmen who refused to accept defeat. Men like Tomasz Kowalski who understood that innovation comes from necessity, not resources. The book became required reading at Polish military academies. Tomasz's rocket launcher, preserved in sketches and descriptions since the actual weapons had been destroyed, was studied as an example of battlefield innovation, under extreme conditions, but Tomasz himself remained quietly unimpressed. When students visited him in the 1970s asking about his genius engineering, he corrected them. It wasn't genius. It was desperation. When your choice is build something or die, you build something. Anyone would have done the same. Tomasz Kowalski died in 1989 at age 71 in Warsaw. He'd survived Nazi occupation, built weapons from garbage, destroyed Tiger tanks, and lived through 44 years of communist rule. His obituary in the Polish newspaper Gazeta Wyborcza mentioned his wartime service, but focused more on his 40 years as a factory mechanic. The headline read, Tomasz Kowalski, Ursus factory mechanic, dies at 71. No mention of the improvised rocket launcher, no mention of the Tiger tank, just a mechanic who'd lived a quiet life. But at his funeral, something unexpected happened. 15 elderly men attended, former soldiers from his 1st Infantry Division unit. Men who'd watched him build the launcher, witnessed the Tiger explosion, survived because Tomasz had refused to accept that they had no chance. One of them, Piotr, now 72, who'd been Tomasz's spotter that day in February 1945, gave a brief eulogy. Tomasz never wanted recognition, never wanted to be called a hero. He just wanted to fix things. Engines, machines, weapons, problems. When the Germans had Tigers and we had nothing, Tomasz fixed that problem with a drainage pipe and stubbornness. He taught us that resources don't matter. Will matters. Creativity matters. Refusing to accept defeat matters. The Germans had factories, engineering degrees, industrial capacity. Tomasz had scrap metal and determination, and his scrap metal killed their Tiger. Today, the Polish Army Museum in Warsaw has a recreation of Tomasz's rocket launcher, built from his sketches and Dr. Nowicki's research. The placard reads, Improvised Anti-Tank Weapon, 1945, built by Tomasz Kowalski from drainage pipe, captured explosives, and salvaged materials. Successfully destroyed Tiger tank at 250 meters. Represents Polish resistance ingenuity during 6 years of occupation. School groups visit it regularly. Teachers explain that Poland survived, not because it had the best weapons, but because it had people who refused to stop fighting even when they had nothing. Military engineers study it as a case study in extreme improvisation. NATO weapons development courses reference it when teaching that innovation often comes from constraints, not abundance. But here's what the museum placard doesn't say. Tomasz built that launcher knowing it might explode in his hands. Knowing he'd only get one shot. Knowing that if he missed, a Tiger tank would obliterate his position. He built it anyway. Because desperation doesn't wait for perfect solutions. It creates imperfect ones that work. Here's the truth about Tomasz Kowalski. He wasn't a weapons designer or an engineer. He was a mechanic who understood that war doesn't care about credentials, cares about results. And results come from people who refuse to accept that impossible means anything. They laughed at his scrap metal rocket launcher, called it junk, said it would never work. Then it punched through Tiger armor and changed everything. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. Drop a comment about a time you solved an impossible problem with limited resources. Share this so Tomasz Kowalski's name lives on. So a mechanic who built a Tiger killer from garbage is never forgotten. The Germans had 70 tons of steel. Tomasz had a drainage pipe, and the drainage pipe won. Remember, the best weapon isn't always the most expensive or most advanced. Sometimes it's the one you build yourself when no one else will give you a chance to fight. Tomasz Kowalski spent 6 years proving that ingenuity beats resources. One shot, one Tiger, one homemade rocket that shouldn't have worked but did. Poland survived because of men like him, men who looked at scrap metal and saw weapons, men who looked at impossible odds and built solutions anyway. His launcher was crude. His materials were garbage. His chances were terrible, but his will was unbreakable. And in the end, that's what won.